She sat down next to the bed and cleared her throat dramatically. Peter looked surprised. You didn't open it? No, I waited to open it with you. I was going to come yesterday, but you weren't feeling well, so I waited. It was torture. I almost died. Impressive, very impressive, Peter said, pointing to the desk. There's an envelope opener in the drawer. Oh, you opened it by hand. Jenny had torn open the seam of the envelope with her hands. The love affairs of Dolus Eventualis 02. My patience ran out climbing those stairs. Let's read it. Jenny unfolded the letter and began to read the handwritten words. I read your letter well. It was the first time I received such a special letter. You are the first person to think of me in that way. I look forward to your next letter. Yours, Philip. The letter was very short. After reading it, Jenny wiggled with excitement. What do you think? My Philip. Our prince is mine. Did he write it by hand? Yes, and his handwriting is beautiful. Jenny handed the letter to Peter. Peter narrowed his eyes. During a recent class where they translated English poems into Korean, Philip had written on the board at the teacher's request. Peter had unintentionally memorized Philip's handwriting because it was so elegant and beautiful. But the handwriting in the letter was different from Philip's. It was pretty, but too delicate for a man. Peter hesitated before asking Jenny. Are you sure this letter is from Philip? Of course. Who else would it be from? His name is right there, Philip Levin. But why did he write it in English? Because we are in America. English is more comfortable. Yeah, I guess. Seeing Peter's unenthusiastic response, Jenny's face fell. Do you think this letter isn't from him? No, that's not what I meant. You think someone like Philip wouldn't reply to me, don't you? No, Jenny, that's not it. Forget it. I thought you'd be happy for me. Jenny turned away, pretending to cry. Peter, panicking, got up from the bed. No, it's just that Peter decided to tell her everything. He had seen Philip at the Korean Student Association meeting and noticed his handwriting. He wanted to apologize for not telling her earlier. But before he could speak, Jenny turned back, sticking out her tongue. Gotcha. You. Do you think I'd be upset over something like this when I received such a precious letter from Philip? Ha ha. Jenny laughed heartily, waving the letter. Peter, feeling exasperated, sat back down on the edge of the bed, feeling dizzy from his recent fever. Are you okay? You don't look well, Jenny asked, looking worried. Peter weakly shook his head. It's just the medicine making me sleepy. Did you eat? Yes, earlier. I'm worried. What did the doctor say? I might need surgery. It could be a major one. If it goes well, I might be able to run around like everyone else. But the success rate is less than 10%. Oh. Jenny looked at him with concern before clapping her hands as if she remembered something. What about the novel you sent to the publisher? Any news? I almost forgot about it. No, nothing yet. Maybe I shouldn't have sent it. Jenny had read Peter's novel in his notebook and had been so excited she ran to him barefoot the next day, declaring he was a genius and insisting they send it to a publisher. Peter had been reluctant, thinking it was too good to be true, but Jenny had typed it up and handed it to him, giving him the courage to submit it. Don't worry. They'll get back to you soon. If that publisher doesn't see how great it is, we'll send it somewhere else. Do you know how many times the lady who wrote Harry Potter got rejected by publishers? How can you compare my novel to that? I think yours is much better. The novel, about a boy who discovers a door to another world in his dreams and finds it affecting his reality, was consistently dreamy and enchanting. Jenny had picked it up out of boredom but ended up reading it all night, rushing to Peter as soon as the sun came up. It will definitely work out. Keep writing more stories. Peter smiled shyly as Jenny held his hand. You'll be successful. I know it. Thank you. If I make it big, I'll buy a mansion and give you an entire floor. Really? Then I'll tell Aunt Spencer I won't be moving into her house. Yes, do that. They laughed together. The neighbors' angry shouts for Jenny echoed from next door. She sighed. I have to go. Jenny said goodbye to Peter, who weakly waved his hand. Take care of yourself. See you next time. Okay, bye. After Jenny left, Peter lay back down. The lingering fever made his eyes feel gritty. Thinking about the love letter to Philip made him smile. He remembered helping Jenny write the letter, choosing orange stationery because Jenny worried it was too conspicuous for a love letter. Peter had reassured her that orange was the color of the sun, Philip's color, and she had agreed immediately. He had carefully written the letter as if he was sending it himself. The thought that Philip had read it made his face flush. His fever rose again. Peter lay in bed, imagining the boy holding the orange letter. Are you sure you're okay? Yes, I'm fine. You don't have a fever, but it might be too soon to go out. His mother stood with her arms crossed, worried as she watched him pack his bag. I'm fine. I've rested for 2 days. You don't have to push yourself. I'll be okay. Peter shouldered his bag. He felt it might be a bit too soon to be out and about, but he was determined to attend today. His father usually drove him, but he was busy today, so Peter had to walk. Despite the inconvenience, Peter was resolute. I'm off. Call me if you feel unwell. Don't worry. Leaving his mother's concerns behind, Peter set out. Although his body felt weak, it was nice to walk after a long time. As he waited to cross the street, someone tapped his shoulder. Turning around, Peter's face went pale. It was Fred. Where are you going? You haven't been to school lately. Did you drop out? Peter didn't want to answer. Since that day, he and Fred had ignored each other at school. Fred hadn't told anyone about being knocked out by Jenny, and Peter didn't want to acknowledge Fred either. They lived in different neighborhoods, so running into Fred on the street was a rare occurrence. Peter just wanted to cross the street and reach the building where the youth meeting was being held. She asked if you dropped out. Didn't you hear me? Fred tightened his grip on Peter's shoulder. Peter shrugged him off, making Fred's expression harden as he raised his voice. What's your problem? Why are you ignoring me? Peter didn't answer. He turned and ran, hearing Fred shout and curse behind him. He didn't care if he was called a coward, he just wanted to get away from Fred. Peter's chest burned with pain as he ran, his heart straining from the sudden exertion. He feared Fred might be chasing him, so he kept running. Just a little further, just around the corner. Ooh! Peter collided with someone and fell backward. The person he had bumped into screamed and also fell. Watch where you're going. I'm sorry. Peter apologized and reached out to help the woman up. But he couldn't finish his sentence as a sharp pain spread from his chest. He couldn't breathe, his face paling. The woman looked at him in confusion. What's wrong with you? And nothing. Are you okay? Should I call an ambulance? Peter's legs buckled and he collapsed, gasping for air. He needed his medication. He tried to open his bag, but his hands were too weak, spilling its contents onto the ground. No matter how much he tried to breathe, it felt like he was suffocating. His ears buzzed and cold sweat ran down his face. Someone was slapping his cheeks and shouting at him. He blinked, trying to see clearly. Am I going to die like this? Who will walk Will every morning? I need to tell Grandma I love her and confess to Mom about breaking that dish when I was 7. I need to tell Dad I took that $15 from his wallet. I need to tell Jenny that I actually know the prince. And a face flashed before his eyes. Peter instinctively grabbed the person's coat. There are still things I need to tell him. I need to tell him about Mujean's journey, how it's a beautiful and interesting story he should read. But I can't even move my lips. Someone lifted his head and brought the medicine from his bag to his lips. Realizing what it was, Peter nodded slightly. The pill entered his mouth, followed by water. After swallowing the medication, Peter lay there, panting for a long time. What's going on? Who is he? What's happening? He suddenly collapsed. Voices murmured around him. His blurry vision slowly cleared. Can you hear me? Can you recognize my voice? The voice of the woman he had bumped into. Thank goodness she was kind. Peter nodded. He felt like he could finally breathe. He saw the face of the woman he had bumped into. It was Melinda. With a Korean mother and a French-American father, she was one of the most beautiful girls in the Korean Student Association. Fluent in French, English, and Korean, she was also the head cheerleader. Do I need to call an ambulance? No, I'm fine. Peter managed to answer. Are you okay? A gentle male voice came from behind. Melinda nodded and smiled. I'm fine. Just a little bump. Good thing you're not hurt. Peter realized it wasn't Melinda holding his neck but someone else. He let go of the sleeve he was gripping. Are you okay? The man's gentle voice was now directed at Peter, making his heart pound again. I found your medication in your bag, right? Yes. Even as he answered, Peter couldn't lift his head. He felt more embarrassed about collapsing in front of him than anything else. Can you stand? Philip asked again. When Peter nodded, Philip helped him up. Melinda picked up the items that had fallen from his bag and returned them. Philip brushed the dust from Melinda's clothes and asked if she was okay, his gaze warm. Yes, I'm fine. I was worried. I ran over when I saw you fall. Peter watched them, standing together like a picture-perfect couple. Their beauty and vitality drew the attention of passers-by. Peter thought they looked great together. But even as he thought that, his heart ached. He slung his bag over his shoulder. Melinda asked again if he was really okay. I'm fine. Really? Peter had always been taught to live with gratitude for the kindness of others, but at that moment, he felt more embarrassed than thankful for Melinda's kindness. Standing beside them made him acutely aware of his own inadequacies, making him feel so small that he wished he could sink into the ground and disappear. Ah, just a moment, Philip called out, causing Peter to freeze in his tracks. You dropped this, Philip said, holding out an orange piece of stationery. Peter hastily snatched it and stuffed it into his bag. If Philip had read Jenny's letter, he would have recognized the same stationery. Especially since the letter was written in Korean. It's not my letter. I just translated it. I only helped as a friend. Peter's mind raced with excuses, worried that Philip might misunderstand and think it was a love letter. His hands trembled at the thought. But Philip didn't ask anything. Instead, he wrapped an arm around Melinda's shoulder and disappeared into the building. The crowd that had surrounded Peter also began to disperse, each returning to their own business. Left alone on the street, Peter pondered the source of the aching pain in his chest. The orange letter in his bag felt like a heavy weight on his shoulders. How about the design? Well, I'm a curvy lady, so I need a style that accentuates my figure. What about the color? Gold, maybe. Don't you think gold would suit me? I think blue tones would look good on you too. Of course. Sitting side by side in a small room, Peter and Jenny discussed various outfit ideas, coloring them in with colored pencils. I should match the color with the prince's outfit. It would be nice if he wore a tie that matched my dress. Peter's hand paused as he colored with a blue pencil. Are you still getting replies? Of course. Want to see them? No. You're so weird. Why don't you want to see them? Why would I read someone else's letters? It's weirder that you want to show them all to me. Peter pretended to grumble nonchalantly. Letters from Philip were still coming regularly. Jenny now asked Peter to translate them every other day. Peter diligently translated her letters, staying up all night if necessary to look up unfamiliar words in the dictionary. But he hadn't read any of the replies since that day. The pain in his chest intensified every time he thought of Philip standing next to Melinda. Anyway, the prince is definitely into me. He said he feels a fateful connection to me. He can't sleep without reading my letter before bed. He said he always ends his day by reading it. I've memorized that story already. Jenny recounted the contents of Philip's letters to Peter in detail every time she visited. Peter knew the contents by heart even without reading the replies. With about 2 weeks left until prom, Jenny's dreams grew more elaborate. She had even given up her favorite chocolates to fit into the perfect dress for Philip. She was certain she would be his partner. The prince will come to pick me up in front of my house, right? He'll definitely bring a fancy car. Does he have a driver's license? Of course. Did I mention his father is a British noble? Isn't that amazing? So romantic. He might have another partner. There's no way. We're exchanging such passionate letters. But if Philip is dating someone else, what will you do? Peter asked cautiously. Jenny clicked her tongue, looking at him with disdain. Why are you being so negative? That's not going to happen. But what if? Before he could finish, Peter's mother knocked and called his name. Peter. Yes, come in. I brought you some cookies and lemonade. She placed the snacks on the desk. What are you two doing? Helping Jenny choose a prom dress. Wow, it's that time already. I loved prom. Have you chosen a partner? Are you going with Peter? No, I have a prince to go with. Really? That's a shame. I wanted to take pictures of you two together. Oh, and a letter came for you. It's from a newspaper. From a newspaper. Peter looked puzzled as he took the envelope from his mother. He didn't remember expecting any mail from a newspaper. The envelope was indeed addressed to him. What is it? An advertisement. Open it. Jenny urged him excitedly. Peter carefully opened the letter with a letter opener, glancing at Jenny's eager face. She was practically bouncing with anticipation. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Your manuscript. Peter's eyes widened as he read. He looked up at Jenny in disbelief. Keep reading. What does it say? What's it about? Keep going, his mother urged, equally excited. Peter continued reading, his voice trembling. Your manuscript has been well received. Congratulations. Your short story has won an award in the fiction category of our competition. Peter's eyes widened even further. He quickly scanned the rest of the letter and checked the name on the envelope again. It was definitely addressed to him, but he didn't remember sending his manuscript to this newspaper. Did you write a story? Did it win a prize? His mother asked, astonished. I did write one, but I don't remember sending it to her. Something was definitely off. Peter thought there had been a mistake. I sent it. What? When the publisher didn't respond, I sent it to the newspaper. I saw an ad for a short story competition in the paper. Well, actually, I was eating jam on the newspaper, but still. That publisher must be blind not to recognize your talent. So I sent it somewhere else. Peter stared at her, speechless, looking back and forth between the letter and Jenny's face. Are you mad? For sending your story without asking? No. Then why aren't you happy? Jenny asked cautiously. Peter blinked a few times before responding. I'm just so happy I don't know what to do. Then scream. Woohoo! Jenny jumped up and down, spreading her arms wide. Her exuberance was contagious, and Peter soon joined her, shouting and hugging her like a child. It all felt like a dream, an unbelievably happy dream. When he hadn't heard back from the publisher, he had pretended it didn't bother him, but deep down, he had been disappointed. He had secretly hoped that Jenny was right, that he might have a talent for writing. He had eagerly awaited a response from the publisher, excited by the thought. He had deliberately left out his email address and phone number, thinking that waiting for a letter would be less nerve-wracking. But he had checked the mailbox every morning, afternoon, evening, and before bed, realizing how wrong he had been. When he had given up hope of hearing from the publisher, he had stopped thinking about his story altogether. Recently, he had been too busy translating Jenny's letters to dwell on it. I won. I won a prize. Peter shouted. It was the first time he had been recognized by someone outside his family. His parents always told him he was special, but Peter had never felt that way. He felt physically weak and academically behind, always feeling inadequate. He had prayed for a day when he could prove his parents' faith in him. And today was that day. You are special. This is just the result of that. His mother kissed both of them on the forehead and announced they would have a celebration dinner that night. I knew you'd make it. You're talented. Thank you. When you get that castle, remember to give me a whole floor. Jenny winked. Peter nodded enthusiastically. His mother went downstairs to call the rest of the family. Stay for dinner. It's going to be a feast. Jenny shook her head. I have a lot of homework, and I need to write another love letter to the prince and think more about my dress design. I have so much to do. Jenny's mother always had strict schedules for prayer and meals. If Jenny was even a minute late, she knew her mother would punish her, something Peter had heard whispered among the adults. And Aunt Spencer is calling at 7. She probably wants to talk about my dress. I think she's planning to give me a designer dress. That's important. You should definitely take that call. Jenny's mother didn't allow her to have a cell phone. She had to use the old-fashioned landline in the living room for calls. Okay, I'll see you later. Jenny said goodbye, and Peter thanked her again. Really, thank you. Don't mention it. Just buy me something nice later. Will do. Peter smiled and waved. After Jenny left, his mother returned. She told him his father was on his way home and that she had called all the relatives. Peter blushed, feeling that this was all too much, but his mother was overjoyed. Before long, his father came rushing in, parking the car hastily, and his siblings arrived from their grandmother's house. Everyone celebrated as if it were their own achievement. Peter felt grateful to be surrounded by people who shared in his happiness. He was the happiest person in the world that day. Peter grew increasingly happy. He received congratulatory calls from all his relatives, and his mother invited everyone nearby for a celebration party. When he received the award from the newspaper, his entire family came to congratulate him. The award turned out to be from a prestigious competition, and his win was even mentioned in the local newspaper. His mother cut out the small article and stuck it to the top of the refrigerator, while his father proudly looked at Peter's certificate several times a day. The president of the Korean Association contacted Peter, saying they wanted to give him an honorary plaque. At school, his literature teacher called him to the front of the class to talk about his win. Students who hadn't even noticed Peter before now congratulated him, including Melinda and Philip. When Philip casually congratulated him in passing, Peter responded with a trembling thank you. Philip joked about getting an autograph from the future author, making everyone around them laugh. It was a silly thing, but that night, Peter went home and practiced his signature, dreaming of his future success as a writer. Those were happy days. Peter felt overwhelmed by the happiness that had filled his life over the past week. The only concern that nagged at him was Jenny. Initially, she had shared in his joy as if it were her own, but she had now fallen into another depressive episode and had been holed up in her house for 3 days. As always, Peter waited for her to come to him first. One night, Peter was startled by the sound of small pebbles hitting his window. When he looked out, he saw Jenny's face, swollen and bruised. Her arms bore numerous self-inflicted cuts, and there was a blue bruise near her temple, as if she had hit something. Peter had always pretended not to notice her small injuries, but this time he couldn't ignore them. "What happened to you? What's wrong with your arms?" "I scratched myself. I fell." It was clear that her injuries weren't from a simple fall. Peter steeled himself and pressed her further. "Jenny, hurting yourself isn't right. You know that. If you're struggling, you can talk to me." "What difference does it make if I talk to you?" "What?" "You say to talk to someone if you're having a hard time." "But what changes? It just makes you and me both feel worse." She bit her lip, her eyes blazing. Her lower lip was chewed raw. "I don't want to talk about depressing things. Nothing changes." "How about seeing a counselor?" "They all say the same thing. Do you think they can change my mom?" "Nothing changes unless someone kills us. This problem will keep repeating forever." "Don't talk like that. Why would you say something so scary? Don't talk about dying. Don't do it again. You said you'd be sad if I were hurt. I'm the same. You understand what I'm saying, right?" Peter held her hand. Jenny reluctantly nodded. After a moment of silence, she forced a brighter tone. "I talked to Aunt Spencer." "Yeah." "She offered to buy me a dress, but I declined. I don't think it's right to keep accepting gifts. What do you think?" "That's good. It's best to do what you feel is right." Peter suspected that Jenny's mother wouldn't buy her the dress. "I'm thinking of using my savings to buy it. Will you come with me to pick it out?" "Of course." Finally, a faint smile appeared on her face. "Then we'll go tomorrow." "What time?" "At 4. Peter had already planned to go to the department store with his mother at that time, but he nodded without hesitation. "All right." They stood up from the bench. As they parted, Peter hugged her a little tighter than usual. But the next day, 4 o'clock came and went, and Jenny never showed up. After waiting for her for a long time, Peter had no choice but to go to the department store with his mother. Jenny's moods continued to fluctuate wildly. She would come to Peter when she felt like it, talk for hours, and then leave. Peter noticed her fabrications becoming more frequent, and while it saddened him to see how much she was struggling, he remained by her side, hoping she would eventually return to the happy person he knew. However, she sank deeper into her depression. She would get angry just seeing Peter having a pleasant conversation with his mother and would pick fights over the smallest things. Even Peter, who always tried to comfort his best friend, began to feel his patience wearing thin. The most troubling issue for Jenny was that the letters from her prince had stopped coming. At first, she said it must be a mistake and nervously chewed her nails. Eventually, she accused Peter of writing something strange in the letters, yelling at him in anger. Peter was stunned but couldn't bring himself to get angry with her. He swore he hadn't done anything wrong, but Jenny's fury didn't abate and was directed entirely at him. "You're only successful because of me, not because you're talented. Don't get cocky just because you won an award. Are you sabotaging my relationship with the prince out of jealousy?" Her baseless accusations left Peter speechless. He knew from the many books he had read for Jenny's sake that people with depression often projected their frustrations onto others. However, this was the first time he had been on the receiving end of such intense anger. He tried to reason with her, repeatedly insisting that he would never do such a thing and reminding her how much he cared about her. But she only continued to hurl her unfounded accusations at him. As Jenny grew more erratic, her delusions intensified. She even claimed that the prince had come to her house the previous night and sung to her. Peter's heart ached. He knew this couldn't be true because he had been up late reading and hadn't seen Philip outside her house. Jenny talked for an hour about the song the prince had sung to her, then suddenly fell silent and glared at Peter. "Why do you look like that? You're the one who ruined everything out of jealousy, right?" Peter felt so wronged and angry that he wanted to cry, but he could only deal with his frustration alone. He told himself that this was just another of Jenny's depressive episodes, longer than usual, and that the kind friend he knew was still inside, watching and hurting. Since emotional pain couldn't be seen, it was impossible for young Peter to understand just how severe her condition had become. Jenny's depressive episode ended as abruptly as a summer rainstorm. One day, she came bounding up the stairs, bursting into Peter's room with a letter in hand, her face alight with excitement. "The prince sent me an invitation. A party invitation. A party invitation." Peter, who had been reading, sat up halfway. "He wants to invite me to a party. This is big news. Only the most popular kids at school get invited to this party." Jenny exclaimed in excitement. But Peter couldn't share in her joy. Given her recent state, he couldn't help but doubt the authenticity of the letter. Could it be from another friend? Someone else who likes you? Peter asked cautiously, not wanting to hurt her feelings. "What are you talking about? Who else would send me an invitation like this? Do you not believe me? Here, read it yourself." She thrust the letter at him. The letter invited her to a party, giving the location and time. Peter remembered Philip's handwriting from the last time he had seen it. It was distinctly different from the handwriting on this invitation. Anyone could see the difference. Peter decided it was time to come clean with Jenny. "You know how I go to the Korean Association meetings every weekend, right?" "Yeah. Why?" "Philip sometimes attends those meetings too." Jenny looked stunned. "Not every week, but sometimes. Why are you telling me this now? Do you know how much trouble I went through to put letters in his locker? I even pretended to be sick during class to do it. If I had known, I would have asked you to deliver them for me." Jenny fumed at the misplaced effort. "Well, it's just once every couple of weeks. And sometimes I can't go because I'm sick." "Yeah, we exchanged letters every few days. So why are you telling me this now?" Jenny looked suspicious. Peter swallowed hard. "I wanted to tell you, but I kept missing the chance. And I don't really interact with him much." As he spoke, Peter fidgeted with his fingers. Not much interaction. There had been some interaction. Philip probably remembered his face and name. But Peter couldn't tell Jenny that. He didn't fully understand his feelings when he saw Philip, the flutter in his heart, or the ache in his chest, and he didn't want to share those feelings with anyone. He felt guilty for keeping it from Jenny, but he comforted himself that it was okay to keep some things private. "Really? Well, I guess it makes sense. The prince is always surrounded by people. You wouldn't have had a chance to get close." Peter felt a pang of resentment. He wanted to tell her that he had spoken with Philip, that Philip had congratulated him and even joked about getting his autograph someday. But now wasn't the time for that. He needed to focus on the reason he had brought this up. "Sometimes I've seen Philip write on the blackboard or take notes." "Wow. That must have been amazing to see," Jenny said, licking her lips as if savoring the thought. "But the handwriting is different. What? The handwriting on this letter is different from Philip's handwriting. Jenny stared at him, her excitement fading. The handwriting on that letter is different from Philip's, Peter said, bowing his head. He expected Jenny to scream or get angry. She might hurl insults at him. Having just pulled herself out of a depressive episode, she could easily be thrown back into the abyss of despair. Peter braced himself for the worst. But her reaction was unexpected. Ha ha ha, what are you talking about? What? The handwriting is different. So what? I have different handwriting styles too. There's the handwriting for homework, the handwriting for writing a reflection, and the handwriting for my diary. They are all different. She ticked them off on her fingers. No, I mean. I thought it was something serious. Ha ha ha, was that really bothering you? Jenny asked, treating him like a child. No, that's not it. The handwriting is definitely. You're too suspicious, Peter. I'm worried about you. Peter knew how Jenny was treated at school. He had faced similar treatment himself, so he worried about her even more. It was strange for Philip to suddenly invite her to a party when they barely knew each other. And with Melinda by his side, why would he ask her to be his partner? What if she went to the party and got bullied by others? I understand why you're worried, but I'm sure this time. The prince himself sent the invitation. No one can say otherwise. Jenny shrugged, patting Peter on the back. Her cheerful demeanor almost brought tears to his eyes. You're back, my friend. Oh no, what do I do? The party is this weekend, and I don't have anything to wear. Wait, it's a costume party. Oh no, what do I do? A costume party. Yes. We need to plan. We are going to stay up all night planning. Jenny shouted, and Peter smiled broadly. He pushed down the creeping anxiety and welcomed his friend's return with open arms. He had no idea what that piece of paper would lead to, not yet. Choi and Siep stared at the photo he had miraculously taken. It was a stroke of luck that he had been there at that moment. But he couldn't bring himself to fully rejoice in his fortune. No matter how much he disliked someone, seeing them lying in a pool of blood was not pleasant. Once he confirmed it was Kang Youngmo lying there, he ran to a nearby public phone to call 119. Pretending to be a passerby, he did not reveal his identity when making the emergency call. He hid in a nearby alley until he saw the ambulance take Kang Youngmo away, then he left the scene. He took a long walk and then a bus ride home. Once there, he connected his phone to his computer to examine the photo. The image clearly showed Lee Woo-yeon throwing away a wallet in an alley. If the police were to investigate, they would find the wallet, making this undeniable evidence. Choi In-seop printed the photo. He pinned it to the board on his wall, which was already covered with information about Lee Woo-yeon. This final piece completed the picture. It's done. Finally. He mumbled to himself, staring blankly at the board. Memories of the hardships he endured to gather information about Lee Woo-yeon flashed through his mind. He remembered freezing his feet to the ground while waiting in the cold, tearing the soles of his shoes off as he pulled them free, and crying all the way home. He remembered sifting through Lee Woo-yeon's trash, getting mistaken for a thief, and being hauled to the police station. He remembered getting slapped by female fans who mistook him for a perverted stalker. He remembered countless nights crying himself to sleep, wishing he could return to America, but eventually becoming Lee Woo-yeon's manager. That was only the beginning. Stalking him for information was physically exhausting but emotionally easier. Being by his side, maintaining social relationships was the real challenge. He always feared Lee Woo-yeon would recognize him or see through his facade. Worse, he couldn't deny his growing feelings for Lee Woo-yeon, which filled him with guilt and sorrow. It's over. I just need to hand this over to the press. He laughed. The laughter wouldn't stop. He laughed like a madman in front of the board he'd worked so hard to create. If anyone had seen him, they might have thought he had lost his mind. Eventually, he collapsed to the floor, laughing and crying simultaneously. It was a mixture of relief, sorrow, and pain. Why had Li Wuyun attacked Ken Yunmo? Because of him? No, Li Wuyun wasn't driven by a sense of justice. He was a terrible person. He had to be. Even after witnessing it and capturing it in a photo, he found it hard to believe. He felt an overwhelming heaviness in his chest. He thought everything would be resolved, but the weight remained. He had done it for Jenny, to validate her words. He thought the guilt would fade after exacting revenge. But as time passed, he realized his feelings for Li Wuyun were growing. The guilt only increased. He felt like he was walking through a dense fog, each day precarious. It's suffocating. Choi In-seop stepped out of his room. The only advantage of living in an attic room was that he could get fresh air by simply opening the door. He sat on the old sofa left by the previous tenant. He had heard that seeing stars in the Seoul sky was rare, but tonight was one of those rare nights. It was a lucky day in many ways. Yet, he sat there with a sullen expression. He needed to start packing up his life here. Quit his job, give up his apartment, and book a flight ticket. It was all over. But his heart wasn't done. Thinking about the bittersweet future, he got up. Just then, his phone rang. Seeing the caller's name, he felt a chill run through him. Should I answer it? After a moment's hesitation, he answered. Yes, this is Choi In-seop. It's me. The soft, elegant voice on the other end made him tremble. He prayed Li Wuyun wouldn't notice. Is there something you need? Trying to sound calm, his heart pounded as if someone were hammering nails into it. He couldn't shake the image of Li Wuyun emerging from the alley, his hand icy on the phone. I just thought of you. The unexpected response left him momentarily speechless. Why? Can't I just call my manager? No, that's not it. It's just unexpected. In all the time he'd worked with Li Wuyun, he'd never received a personal call from him. Of all times, the first personal call came on the night he assaulted Ken Yunmo. The gentler Li Wuyun's voice was, the more scared Choi In-seop felt. He struggled to keep his voice steady. The stars are bright tonight. Yes. It's rare to see stars in Seoul. If you're home, step outside and take a look. Li Wuyun had briefly hosted a radio show. Though it was when he was a rookie, it was rare for a popular actor to have a regular radio gig. It was a late-night 2 a.m. show with few listeners, but Li Wuyun had wanted to try it. The results were astonishing. It was the only late-night show with 5 sponsors, and the stations had even gave him a commendation. Voice was soothing and sweet. Listening to him now, Choi In-seop understood why so many girls stayed up late to listen to him. Yes. I'm outside now. Not at home. My place is near the roof, so I'm outside. Then we are looking at the same sky. The phrase, same sky, made him blush. He touched his cheek, feeling the warmth. The weather had warmed, and his hand wasn't as cold as before. Right, he replied weakly, hugging his shoulders. Are you feeling better? His tone was genuinely kind and caring. But Choi In-seop was terrified. It was the proximity to Li Wuyun after what he'd seen, the unpredictability of his actions, and the unsettling realization that he enjoyed Li Wuyun's voice. Yes, I'm fine. You should have been more careful with your injured hand. I'm sorry. A small laugh came from the other end, sounding genuinely pleased. All right. If you're sorry, be more careful next time. Be more careful. Those words echoed in his mind, bringing back the cold expression on Li Wuyun's face in the alley. He hugged his shoulders tightly, nodding as if Li Wuyun could see him. Yes. I will. See you tomorrow. The sudden call ended just as abruptly. Choi Inseop sighed, putting the phone back in his pocket. This was the end. It's over, he whispered to himself. The words etched into his heart, giving him the strength to stand up.